Earn cryptocurrency? Try Coinbase. Coinbase.
Grace, good day in gratitude, family. This is Face the Nation with Bolden Unchained, and we're back again for chapter 1 of our second book. You know, we just completed book number 1, Red Summer, the summer of 1919, the awakening of Black America. I think the author was Cameron McWhirter. And we finished that book. I don't see it anywhere. Oh, here it is. We did finish this book. Congratulations. And now we're going to start racial violence in Kentucky, 1865 to 1940. This book here is by George C. Wright, Lynchings, Mob Rule, and Legal Lynchings. Oh, so we did read the introduction last evening, and tonight we're going to start with chapter 1. And I think we'll probably try to pick up the memento with this book here. And maybe, you know, I'll probably try to get in a little earlier instead of midnight with the ancestors, because, you know, they're always with us. All right, chapter 1, Reconstruction, Using Violence to Preserve the Status Quo, 1865 to 1874. And that's just 11 years. Wasn't just 11 years, because I'm sure them 11 years seem like thousands of years. The end of the Civil War ushered in a prolonged period of racial violence in Kentucky. This violence would be just as severe and long-lasting as that found in the Deep South, but too often it escaped the immediate attention of federal officials. Because Kentucky had officially remained a loyal state, its citizens were allowed to rule their own affairs in a way not permitted in the former Confederate states. And that situation worked to the benefit of a large number of former Confederates who returned to their homes in Kentucky after the war. Also, many white Kentuckians who had supported the Union cause, but had opposed emancipation and the elevation of Afro-Americans to equal citizenship, were frustrated and tended to view the freed Blacks with hostility. The first 10 years of emancipation witnessed racial violence in many forms. Numerous attacks on returning Black soldiers who had fought for the Union cause, the forced removal of Afro-Americans from many rural communities, attacks by white mobs on Black churches, and especially on the freedmen schools, and the deaths of countless numbers of Blacks at the hands of white mobs. In other words, many Kentucky whites were determined to preserve the racial subservience that had characterized the antebellum period, and others simply refused to acknowledge that slavery had ended and resorted to force to keep Blacks enslaved. Violence often occurred when Blacks attempted to free themselves from their former masters. The Emancipation Proclamation had freed the slaves in the rebelling states. During the war, some 28,000 Black men in Kentucky joined the Union Army, thereby gaining freedom for themselves and supposedly for their wives and their children. But thousands of Black women and children throughout the state remained in legal bondage until the passing of the 13th Amendment in December 1985. Kentucky's legislatures expressed their disdain for emancipation with the overwhelming negative vote against the measure. Before the amendment was enacted, however, numerous Black veterans opted for direct option and returned to the farms and plantations where they had been enslaved to free their family members. This led to violent confrontations and the deaths of some whites and of an even greater number of Afro-Americans. The 13th Amendment and the determined effort of the Black soldiers did not result in freedom for all Blacks. John S. Graham, Graham, an agent for the Freedmen's Bureau who toured northern Kentucky in May of 1866, reported that a number of blacks remained in bondage in Boone County. It would take a military force of about 30 men to free the slaves, he estimated. Writing from Washington County, another agent said it had taken a writ of habeas corpus to obtain the release of two small black children being held by Robert Cray, Cray, a representative in the Kentucky legislature. Now, why he was holding them babies? The report of the Bureau agent touring southwest Kentucky revealed that in Lyon, Lyon, and Trigg counties, Trigg, in an undetermined number of blacks were still being held in slavery and were being treated far worse than before the government set them free. In December 1868, 3 years after the ratification of the 13th Amendment, the Bureau agent assigned to northern Kentucky explained, in the counties of Owen, Carroll, Trimble, and several other counties in my sub-district, Negroes are kept in a state of vassalage tantamount to the old system of slavery. Negroes are kept in a state of vassalage, vassalage, in a state of vassalage tantamount to the old system of slavery. They was kept in a state of oppression, a state of captivity that was equal to the old system of slavery. In these counties, Negroes are not permitted to live in homes or houses of their own, are not permitted to live apart from their white owners of the soil. Responding to a number of calls to assist Kentucky blacks in gaining their freedom and to protect them from white violence, the federal government agreed to the formation of the Freedmen's Bureau in the state in January 1866. In justifying the need for the agency in a state that had not rebelled against the Union, Clem Fisk, Fisk, then the assistant commissioner of the Bureau in Tennessee, said, I am receiving a large number of complaints from Kentucky of the brutal treatment of returned colored soldiers and their families. Many citizens write to Washington complaining of my delay in protecting the freedmen. Upon arriving in Kentucky, field agents wrote numerous reports detailing the violence. As one agent explained, an examination of this sworn evidence will reveal 60 cases of outrage in a limited district and period, unparalleled in their atrocity and fiendishness, cruelties for which in no instance is there the least shadow of excuse or palliation. Palliation. This agent, like so many others, concluded that only the presence of troops would end the lawlessness in Kentucky. Assistant Commissioner Jefferson C. Davis, described by one scholar as a conservative whose views on what steps the federal government should undertake in the state often clashed with those of his superiors, gave detailed information, including names and dates, on the deaths of the 19 blacks and on outrages committed against another 233 people. Assistant Commissioner Jefferson C. Davis, described by one scholar as the conservative whose views on what steps the federal government should undertake in the state often clashed with those of his superiors, gave detailed information, including names and dates, on the deaths of the 19 blacks and on outrages committed against another 233 people. Local and state officials, Davis explained, refused to apprehend the whites responsible for crimes against blacks. Blacks pleaded with federal officials to send troops to their communities as the only remedy for white violence. From Bowling Green, a group of Afro Americans sent a letter to Washington Spradling, Spradling, a Louisville black leader, informing him of conditions in this area and hoping that he would, in turn, enlighten Baru officials about the situation in that western Kentucky community. We, the colored citizens of Bowling Green, Kentucky, have assembled tonight for the purpose of making an application for the freedmen Baru. Here, as we are very much intruded on. In December 1867, William Sykes, Sykes, of Owensboro expressed his fears that the Baru might leave the state. The Baru is our only protection in Kentucky. Every black man is threatened in the state by every rebel upon the removal of the Baru. It would have been better for black people, he explained, if the agency had never come to Kentucky if it was going to allow the rebels to control the state. We trust that the party who have stood by us and have done so much for us will still stand by us until we are able to contend with an unrelenting foe, Sykes concluded. Given the small number of agents assigned to the state and their limited power, not to mention the determination of whites to dominate and repress blacks, the Freedmen's Bureau had at best mixed results in Kentucky. Many of the agents, themselves believers in white supremacy, were befriended by whites and readily agreed with them on how to solve the Negro problem. It was not uncommon for these agents to side with whites whenever disputes occurred. In a long letter to a Baru official, Samuel McKee, MCKEE, a black from Mount Sterling, stated bluntly that agents John Evans and Henry Clay Howard swindled blacks and treated them with open contempt. Your agents here are in the bait of punishing colored men by beating them for alleged violations of their contracts. It is no better than the old system of slavery. Every rebel sympathizer here is delighted with the workings of the Baru, and I have not met a solitary radical Union man who does not condemn its management. Despite some obvious shortcomings, the Freedmen's Bureau did help Kentucky blacks. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the legal arena. Kentucky blacks would be denied the right to testify in court against whites until the early 1870s, a situation different from that in the North and in the defeated South, where the Civil Rights Act of 1866 had given blacks this right. Blacks in Kentucky would be aided, however, by War Department Order Number 44, giving the Freedmen's Bureau the power to resolve conflicts between the state and federal laws. With Kentucky courts holding firm in denying black testimony, the Bureau consistently moved cases to the United States District Court in Louisville under the jurisdiction of Judge Bland Ballard, Ballard. Intervention by the Bureau into legal proceedings prevented Louisville officials from sending Afro Americans to jail on several occasions. In February 1866, after a run-in with police officers, 2 black women were arrested and taken to city court on charges of drunkenness and disorderly conduct. Both were fined and sentenced to jail for 3 months. But immediately after the court decision, the captain of the Bureau secured the release of the 2 women and carried them before the Bureau court to allow them to testify against the police officers. Deciding that the policemen had been overzealous in arresting the women, officials of the Bureau court decided that if the 2 women would serve the same amount of time in the military prison. The Bureau court decided that if the 2 women were compelled to serve time in jail, then the policemen would serve the same amount of time in the military prison. Not surprisingly, local officials complained about the meddling of the Freedmen's Bureau in civil affairs. The entire matter was allowed to drop after peace bonds were posted for the women and the officers. Clearly, however, local whites had received fair warning of the Bureau's intention to work for equal treatment of blacks. Whites came to realize that having cases involving black testimony transferred to the United States District Court in Louisville worked to their disadvantage. Mhm. A number of whites received prison sentences from Judge Ballard for assaulting blacks or for being involved in terrorist acts committed by the Ku Klux Klan. In a court proceeding unheard of in Kentucky, William Bell was convicted on the testimony of two black men of murdering a Negro and was sentenced to death in 1868. That same year, two white men from Lewis County received the death penalty for the murder of four blacks. In all likelihood, these executions were never carried out. According to Victor Howard, white sentiment changed in favor of allowing black testimony in state courts by 1871. By then, the federal court docket was crowded with cases centering on black testimony. Whites involved in these cases found it time consuming as well as costly to travel to Louisville for court. Without question, Judge Ballard, by ruling that as long as a right was denied to any freedman, no citizen of that class was really free, and all blacks were therefore entitled to transfer their cases to the federal court, had convinced Kentucky whites of the need to accept black testimony in the courts they controlled. Agents of the Bureau worked, though often without success, to end a lingering vestige of slavery, the whipping of blacks. Numerous reports existed of whites beating their former slaves and of the refusal of local officials to take any steps to prevent this physical abuse. A girl, identified only by the name of Eliza, received a severe flogging from her employee in Covington in August of 1866. An agent of the Freedmen's Bureau examined the girl and found that her shoulders and back were horribly lacerated. After obtaining affidavits from several blacks who had witnessed the incident, the agent ordered A.J. White, the man responsible for the flogging, to appear at the Bureau office. White freely acknowledged beating the child, saying that any person he employed would be corrected when doing wrong. The court fined White $50 and ordered him to cease whipping his workers. He refused to pay the fine, and no records existed showing that Bureau agents had White arrested or punished in any manner for his defiance. White probably concluded that he could also ignore the court's edict on punishing black workers. Showing more determination than did their counterparts elsewhere in the state, Louisville's agents took steps to end the practice of whipping blacks. In June 1867, they arrested 5 whites for beating blacks and lodged them in the military prison. Several months later, 6 additional white employees were added for the same offense. It is unknown how long these whites remained in jail, but according to whites, realizing the risk for resorting to corporal punishment, found other ways to discipline black workers. Nevertheless, the beatings continued elsewhere. In September 1867, a Bureau agent in a small community recounted for his supervisors a conversation he had with a local white leader. A man came to me some weeks ago and said, "What am I to do with the woman I have hired? She wants to be a lady, and I can do nothing with her without whooping her. Now, sir, she must be whipped, and I do not want the Bureau on my back for doing so." The whipping of this particular black woman, he went on to explain, was necessary for the well-being of his plantation. That some Bureau agents believed that blacks responded only to the whip further encouraged the practice among white employers. John Evans, identified by a fellow agent as pro-Southern, allegedly whipped blacks for disobeying their employers. For several years after the Civil War, white mobs in Henderson continued whipping blacks who insulted whites. Agents of the Bureau in Henderson failed to convince blacks that they would be protected if they came forward and identified the white ringleaders. The practice of whipping blacks still lived on 8 years after the war. John Small, a Lexington black man, was convicted of petty larceny, and the court handed down a sentence of 39 lashes. This was administered in the jail, and according to the newspaper account, the other inmates, blacks as well as whites, watched and thoroughly enjoyed the beating. It reminded all of them of the good old days of slavery. In the years immediately after the Civil War, the Ku Klux Klan was responsible for much of the violence that the Freedmen's Bureau attempted to end. For more than 40 years, writes Allen W. Trelease, Trelease. For more than 4 years, the Klan whipped, shot, hanged, robbed, raped, and otherwise outraged Negroes and Republicans across the South in the name of preserving white civilization. To be sure, in Kentucky and in the South, a number of white organizations committed violent acts against blacks. But in the eyes of Afro Americans and the general public, the name most associated with violence was the Klan. As scholars of Southern history have noted, during these years, the Klan and the Freedmen's Bureau were pitted against each other as both tried to determine the pace of life for Afro Americans. For the most part, the Klan held sway in Kentucky, as the vast majority of whites, including elected officials, refused to denounce the mob. The violence perpetrated by the Klan in the Bluegrass State would equal in ferocity and frequency the attacks on African Americans anywhere in the old Confederacy. Attacks by the Ku Klux Klan escalated in 1868, the very time that Kentucky blacks began holding conventions and organizing for political activities. In Lexington and in Fayette County, the Klan started harassing several black ministers and educators for appearing at political rallies and for calling upon state officials to extend the suffrage to Afro Americans. That same year, the Klan suddenly appeared in Henderson and began physically attacking black Civil War veterans. Henderson's city fathers responded by passing an ordinance aimed at disbanding the Ku Klux, making it unlawful to wear masks and other disguises in public, and to be involved in organic forms of intimidation. This was certainly a bold stand by Henderson leaders, considering the power of retribution exhibited by the Klan and their unwillingness of civic leaders and elected officials in other cities to express any displeasure over the group's formation. These outbreaks of Klan violence were by no means limited to Kentucky in 1868. If enough potential Republican voters could be convinced that casting their ballots would be dangerous, George Rabel explains, Rable, the Democrats might as well carry the southern states. During a 3-year period beginning in late 1868, scores of whites identified as supporters of the Republican Party received beatings and were run out of several counties in western Kentucky. Meanwhile, in the eastern Kentucky mountain counties of Magoffin, Magoffin, Perry, Breathitt, Breathitt, and Wolfe, Wfe, 19 white men, all Union veterans or supporters of the Grand Old Party, were murdered in a 4-month period. Their deaths were attributed to the Klan. The New York Times strongly condemned the state's Democratic leaders for the violence, saying they refused to take any steps to end the Klan's lawlessness. In reaching this conclusion, the Times cited numerous editorials written by Henry Watterson of the Louisville Courier-Journal, one of the leading spokesmen for the Democratic Party, calling upon his party to restore law and order in the state. And that's Watterson, Henry Watterson. As Watterson wrote in one editorial, the Democratic Party holds possession over every county in Kentucky. The military power of the state is at its call. It has the means to quell disturbances whenever it occurs. It must employ its resources vigorously. The Democratic controlled legislature of 1871 refused to pass a law against mob violence. Many legislators openly endorsed the tactics used by the Klan, while others were afraid to support harsh measures for fear of incurring the Klan's wrath. An indication that the mob was operating without fear of the authorities was the bold assault on the Frankfort jail on February 24th by 75 masked men. They wanted to free Thomas Scroggins, Scroggins, who was charged with the brutal murder of a black man. Scroggins was awaiting trial in federal court since blacks were prohibited from testifying in Kentucky's courts. The mob justified its actions on the ground that no white man should be forced to defend himself in court against the word of a black man. By the end of the war, the violence of the Klan, having spread all over the state, even to the largest cities, could no longer be ignored. In his message to the General Assembly, Governor Preston H. Leslie put the weight of his office behind legislation that made it a criminal offense to write or post threatening notices and to band together and wear disguises. Despite the governor's proclamation against mob violence, a large group of white renegades controlled 15 counties in central Kentucky, usurping local government and becoming for a time more powerful than the law. Democratic and Republican newspapers published a series of stories detailing the lawless activities of the Klan. In November 1872, for example, the New York Times ran a story, Catalog of Recent Outrages in Shelby County, a fearful list of murders, arsons, and floggings committed by a band of lawless criminals. The anonymous writer gave details on scores of instances of blacks being whipped and their homes being robbed, and on the numerous lynchings and murders attributed to the mob. After having rid their area of all whites who had openly supported the Republican Party, the Klan turned to attacking those who employed blacks as sharecroppers and house servants. The writer for the Times, after giving specific dates and information on numerous criminal offenses committed by the Klan, concluded, the above is but a part of their dark deeds. If a man should take the pains to collect together all the information necessary to write an impartial history of their crimes and should write them in detail, they would make a large volume. And if traced by the pen of an able writer, the story, for its mingling of romance and horrors, would not be exceeded by any history of crimes. Because the New York Times was viewed as the newspapers whose primary purpose was to promote the Republican Party, some readers undoubtedly dismissed its accounts on atrocities committed by the Klan. But in August 1873, the Courier-Journal vividly described the violence occurring in Owen and Henry counties. According to the newspaper, at least 88 raids had been conducted by the Klan in less than a year. Black landowners, described by the newspaper as harmless Negroes, were special targets. On numerous occasions, the Klan told the blacks to vacate the area. Such warnings answered the purpose of actual violence by breaking up happy homes and driving wealthy citizens into exile. To counter any doubts about the validity of the stories, the Courier-Journal gave the names of people victimized by the Klan and the dates and places of these outrages. But not wanting the Democrat Party linked with the violence, the Courier-Journal informed its readers that robbery, not politics, had been the chief move. Murders, whippings, warnings are the pastime of the villains. or the means to facilitate their principal purpose. If politics had been the reason for the violence, the Courier Journal stated with assurance, then it had obviously been the work of the radicals. This statement led to an immediate and sharp rebuke from the Times. But surely the Courier Journal does not wish to take but surely the Courier Journal does not wish us to take seriously the hint that these mass assassins are acting in the interest of the radicals. Whatever else radicals in the South may be, they are not such fools as to weaken themselves by driving out the Negroes. If there is anything political in the crimes, it is plainly intended to be in the interest of the democracy. That such is the fact is proved by the incident of a well-known citizen saying these outrages had made a Grant man of him. He was in the midst of them and evidently did not believe they had been committed by radicals. Although disputing the motives for the violence, both the Courier Journal and the Times clearly identified the Klan as being responsible for the racial violence occurring throughout the state. Exactly 1 year later, in September 1874, both newspapers contained long, highly detailed stories of a report by Willis Russell, a United States Marshal who had worked undercover for 4 years as a clerk in a country store in Owen County. Entitled, Official Report of the Owen County Outrages. Russell's report explained that in 1870, bands of armed men, disguised and masked, began committing depredations, depredations, in Owen and Henry counties. That year, 4 white men asked him to join the Ku Klux for the purpose of driving the Negroes from the state. Russell declined, saying that their acts were neither lawful nor meritorious. These men later returned to the store where Russell was employed and purchased material for their gowns and masks. Once their costumes were ready, the men set out to destroy the homes and property of blacks in Stamping Ground, Scott County, because they had ignored a warning to leave the area. During the raid, 1 black died and several others sustained serious wounds. The blacks, however, chose to defend themselves and returned the gunfire and killed at least 1 Klansman. Although running the risk of revealing his true identity, Russell publicly applauded the actions of the Stamping Ground blacks, saying that if the Negroes had killed the entire party, it would have been perfectly right. His statement, of course, drew the enmity of the outlaws. Despite several attempts on his life, Russell continued to gather evidence on the leaders of the Klan. On one occasion, a member of the Klan, tired of being involved in criminal activities but afraid to quit the lawless band, approached Russell and offered information in return for protection. Russell and the unidentified man held regular meetings on the second Saturday of each month. He informed Russell of a planned attack on the black residents of Twin Creek in Owen County. Russell received arms from state officials and assisted the blacks in preparing for the attack, which was called off by the Klan. Taking the risk of being seen with Russell, the informant once made an unexpected visit on a Tuesday to warn Russell that on Thursday night, the Klan planned to murder William Plasters and Russell, Plasters, then traveled to the small community of Browns Bottom and killed the black residents. Once again, Russell's actions prevented those murderous plans from happening. In February 1864, believing that he had had a sufficient number of witnesses to testify against the Klan, Russell requested a squad of soldiers, which was supplied by both the state and the federal governments, and began arresting the leaders of the Ku Klux Klan in Owen and Henry counties. Taken into custody without a fight, all of the Klansmen posted bond, ensuring their appearances at the October term of the United States District Court in Louisville. In his official report on the violence, Russell stated emphatically that more than 100 men have been killed, wounded, or driven away from their portion of Owen and Henry counties, lying on the Kentucky River by the Ku Klux in the last 3 years. Russell gave the names of some of the blacks who had been killed: Sam Crew and family, Crew; James Bourne and family, Bourne; John Dickerson and family, Dickerson; Al Towles and family, Towles; John Mosby, Mosby and family, Wallace Dickerson, Dickerson; Levi Fishback, Fishback, and Thornton Dunlap, Dunlap. In the small community of San Rippie, Rippie. In the small community of San Rippie, Henry County, he added, 4 blacks had been killed. Russell's report also listed the names of at least a dozen whites who had been forced to leave Henry County. Of the whites and blacks still residing in Owen and Henry counties, the majority are all good citizens and are at the heart opposed to those Ku Klux. But they are under a reign of terror and are really afraid to express their opinions, not knowing what moment they will have to pay the penalty, the United States Marshal wrote. Whenever the country is ridden with these pests, it will be as flourishing a community as it was before the Ku Klux organization. On the heels of Russell's report, several local and state officials called for action, issuing a charge to the grand jury to end the violence in his area. Judge John McNamara, McManama of Owen County, said that blacks had suffered most from the Klan's lawlessness, so great indeed that most of them had fled to other and safer locations. Because inefficient law officers had allowed the Klan to operate unchallenged, he said, the people are too apprehensive of danger to condemn or applaud it. Although he had supported a law against mob activities in 1871, Governor Leslie had consistently ignored reports of violence within the state, proclaiming that the situation had been exaggerated by the Republicans for political reasons. Acknowledging the accuracy of Russell's report, however, Leslie agreed with Judge McNamara and announced that troops would remain indefinitely in several counties and would be at the disposal of circuit court judges. It took, however, another tragic incident to fully capture the public's attention and to lead to a strong call to put down the Klan. The charges against the Klansmen were dismissed in United States District Court in October 1874, when the witnesses failed to appear. As Russell had feared, all of the men who had agreed to testify on behalf of the state had disappeared, probably having been murdered by the Klan. Raids by the Klan resumed almost immediately in several counties. Towards the end of the month, the mob invaded the eastern part of Shelby County, whipped 3 blacks, and threatened their employer, Thomas Ford, with violence if he persisted in hiring black workers. The mob then went to the home of a black farmer named Barringer, Barringer. Tragically, Barringer's 16-year-old daughter responded to the knock on the door and was shot in the eye. She was killed instantly. This incident received widespread publicity. Henry Watterson, Watterson, the prominent former Confederate editor of the Courier Journal, condemned Shelby County officials for failing to form a posse to watch out for the outlaws. The governor offered $9,000 reward for the killers of the girl, and in strong language, issued a proclamation denouncing the violence of the Klan in Shelby County. Governor Leslie also berated local officials for not stopping acts of lawlessness. The local authorities seem too often to forget that the whole power of the county is by law placed in their hands, and that on them and not the state executive rests the first and chief responsibility for the repression and punishment of crimes committed within their jurisdiction. Despite the large reward offered and the anti-Klan sentiment expressed by the governor and other state leaders, the men responsible for the raid and for the murder of the Barringer girl avoided arrest and prosecution. Nevertheless, the governor's strong condemnation of the Klan had an effect. Law officers conducted raids on known Klan headquarters in Henry and Owen counties. During one such raid, they captured John W. Brothers, a member of the Klan, and forced him to identify other men who had been active in both counties. County sheriffs and a large group of citizens then scoured the country, captured arms, and a large group of citizens captured arms, implements, masks, and disguises. Warrants were issued for the arrest of more than a dozen Klansmen, but only 4 was captured. The others had left the area already. Whether the men who fled were eventually apprehended and made to stand trial is unknown. But the mere fact that they felt compelled to flee marked a significant change in Kentucky. Several months later, in November 1875, the 4 captured Klan members went on trial in Owen County. 3 of them were found guilty of conspiring against the government by intimidating United States Marshal Willis Russell, but not of the more serious crime of murder. When sentencing the men, the judge was apologetic, expressing a belief that even though they had been found guilty, they were honest, law-abiding citizens. The court sentenced one man to 5 years in prison and another to 3 years. It is a peculiar show of leniency. The other postponed sending. The court postponed sending the 3rd man to prison because of an injury he sustained while pursuing the marshal. The 4th defendant was acquitted. The New York Times explained that while the Klan was being hotly pursued by the authorities in Henry and Owens County, another branch of this lawless group had become active in the southeast region of the state, making Todd County the last rallying place of the outlaw band. On February the 16th, 1865, the Klan burned a black church to the ground. That was followed by the brutal whipping of a black leader by the name of Jessup, Jessup. According to the newspaper account, members of the Klan, after flogging the man, administered salt and pepper to his wounds. This violence was a warning for blacks to leave the area. But since they still refused to do so, the Klan started a full-fledged assault on them in March. The Klan, having selected Edward Long as a target for their violence, set his cabin on fire and shot him to death when he came out of the burning structure. His wife was also wounded in the gunfire. After killing Long, the Klan proceeded to attack his neighbors. As the Times explained it, Negro people were taken out and whipped, cabins burned, and the old long list of lawless acts were repeated.